Hi everyone and welcome back to another murder mystery. I'm so sorry I missed last week. I was just like really sick and I literally couldn't bring myself to get out of bed to make a video, but I'm back this week with an even gruesomer, is that a thing? An even more chilling murder mystery. And this one is called The Bodies in the Barn. This is Bodies in the Barn, more commonly known as the Hinterkaifeck murders in 1922. So Hinterkaifeck was the name of a small farmstead in the middle of Bavaria, Germany. So this farmhouse was in between Ingolstadt, I think that's how it's pronounced, and Strobenhausen, and it was isolated in the middle of forests and hills. So this farmhouse was the home of 5 people, the Gruber family. It was the home of Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old man, and his wife Kazilla, I can't pronounce it, and their daughter Victoria. Now Victoria was married to a boy called Karl Gabriel, so she wasn't known as Gruber, she was known as Gabriel, and she had 2 children. She had Kazilla, named after her mother. She was age 7, and she had Joseph, a 2-year-old. So on the night of the 31st of March, they had a new housemaid starting, and she was known as Maria. So, and Andreas, the father, was known as like a miserly man. Like, he was so angry and aggressive all the time, and this somewhat worsened whenever there was rumours spreading about incest between him and his daughter Victoria. Victoria's husband died in France during World War I in 1914. Then the year after her husband Karl's death, Andreas Gruber was then sentenced to 1 year imprisonment over the incest between Victoria and himself, and Victoria was sentenced to 1 month imprisonment for the same sentence. It was also, now this is disgusting, it was also claimed that Victoria's youngest son Joseph, who's only 2 years old, was actually the child between her and her father. Now, so that his grandchild was actually his son, but this was never proved to be true or anything, but this is just speculation. But the father on the birth certificate is the mayor of the village, Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Now, I'm trying to pronounce these names, I don't have a clue, I'm not German, so bear with me. And he wanted to marry Victoria so much, but Andreas, the father, would not let this happen, and he actually chased Lorenz off of their farm property with a scythe. Now imagine someone running after you. Oh, no thank you, bye, adios amigo. So the maid before Maria had started work was called Karenz Reiner. I can't pronounce these names, so you just have to bear with me. And she had told police that she overheard Andreas speaking to Victoria saying, and I quote, "You don't need to marry as long as I live because I'm here for this." Excuse me, what? So she said to the police that she alluded that this meant that he was there to sexually satisfy her, like, and that's why she wasn't allowed to marry. Okay, weird, moving on. So on the night coming up to the a couple of days coming up to the murders, Andreas had noticed some strange occurrences happening around the farm and the farmhouse, and he had told neighbours all these strange occurrences but never reported them to them. So they lived like near Bavaria, Germany. And in their house one day, randomly, a newspaper from Munich showed up. Like, he just walked into his kitchen and he looked at the kitchen window, and on the windowsill there was sitting a Munich newspaper. Now, this town is like not near where they lived. So it was actually 1 hour and 1 minute to get from where they lived to Munich. So this newspaper was nowhere near them. So it wasn't like local. So how did this newspaper get there? So obviously Andreas asked the postman to see if the postman had left it there. But he says no, like he denied that he didn't deliver any of that newspaper of any kind to anyone in the area. So it wasn't the postman's ruled out. And then another day, it was snowing outside, so whenever Andreas looked outside the window, like the ground was covered in snow, which would have been lovely, I'd say, with all this big massive land they have, because apparently they were really wealthy. So he looked out anyways, and because the house was surrounded with trees and hills and everything, there was a forest near the house, and he looked out and he saw footprints from the dark forest beside the house coming towards the corner of their farmhouse, and then no footprints going back to the forest again. So there was footprints that came from the forest to the house but didn't go back. So obviously whoever that was still around the area at the time. But he thought maybe it was just someone was like trespassing like their grounds, or maybe was it someone, you know, spying on them, like peeping in through windows and all. Dunno. So cranes, I don't know. So cranes, the maid at this time before Maria came on the scene, certainly thought that there was someone watching the area, and you know, she felt like someone was watching her. So one day she packed up her bags, she fled and never returned. Away, gone, bye. And around the same time of all these strange occurrences, like this footprints and all, Andreas had his house keys on the desk, his work desk, and these had gone missing randomly. Like someone just came, lifted them off the desk and gone. And it wasn't any of the children or anything. So, and it wasn't the wife or the daughter, so it had to be someone else, surely. And it wasn't maid, because the maid was gone. And then later, like that week, someone had tried to break into their like engine room. And then he had also said to his neighbours that someone had been stealing the livestock. He also heard someone overhead in the attic. So someone's footprints was seen around the yard. Newspaper randomly that no one left there. Keys gone missing. Someone breaking into the engine room. Hearing someone or something rattling, like walking out up the stairs. That's 5 things. Still didn't report it to the police, but okay, we move on. So then Andreas had said to the neighbours as well, over several couple of nights, he had heard noises overhead in the attic, walking around like whenever he was sleeping and whatnot. But he went to investigate, but nothing turned up. Like there was nothing there. And the neighbour obviously said, like, this is like coming from the place that the neighbour said to the police, that they said to him, like, why don't you tell the police? And he said, and I quote, I know how to defend myself, end quote. Okay then. While these were all causes for concern, nothing was done about it. And then on April 1st, Kazilla, the 7-year-old, didn't show up to school. Like, she went to like primary school nearby. Like, it was only like, I think it was like 20 minutes away from their home, and she didn't go to school on Saturday, but the teacher never thought anything of it because Kazilla was normally sick anyway. So the teacher says like a healing prayer or something, and then they just got on with the rest of the class. So didn't find anything wrong about it. And then Victoria, she normally on a Sunday meets up with a group of friends and walks to church, but on Sunday no one appeared to church. Like, friends waited for Victoria, she never came. They went on and none of the family turned up to church at all. So okay, a wee bit sus, but we move on. On the 4th of April, Albert Hoffner had worked at the feeding machine. He was a local mechanic that would normally come and do all the jobs on the farm, like mechanic work obviously. And he done all this work for hours and didn't see any of the family, didn't see a soul. And whenever he arrived on the farm, he went to the front door and the back door and like tried to like knock and everything to say, oh, I'm here to do the work and whatnot. Didn't see anybody, not at all. All he heard was a dog barking inside the house. So they had a dog obviously. Whenever Albert finished the job, like he was obviously out in he was probably way away from the house anyways doing it. And whenever he finished the job, he went back to the house thinking, oh, maybe they're right whenever I was first here earlier, and maybe I'll just tell them I've got the job done and get on with my day. And went up to the house to tell them the job was done. Still no one there, and the dog's still barking. So he went anyways, and he told the neighbours that the job was done just in case they were away out of town or something, and they came back and they were wondering if he came, so the neighbours were able to say. So that was grand. He went on with his day dilly-dally. So you know what, later on that day, all the neighbours decided to get together and go up and check to see what was happening on the farm, because obviously they hadn't seen anyone, so something was obviously going on. They just went to check up anyways to see if everyone was okay. And when they went to the house, all the doors were locked. Every single one of them. So obviously no one was in. Because they hadn't seen any of the gribbers in days. Like, they hadn't seen them since March 31st. Hadn't seen any of them in days. They decided something's wrong. Dog was barking, and the men decided they, just kick down the door. So knocked down the door, and boom. They knocked down the barn door now, by the way, so that's where the bodies were. So they literally knocked down the door, and then boom, dead bodies everywhere. Oh, like obviously that was shocking for all of them. Anyways, this door was knocked down, and all they seen was the daylight illuminating all these bodies plonked on the hay. So Victoria and, how do I say it again? Kazilla. Victoria, Kazilla, Andreas and Kazilla Jr., the granddaughter, all laying on the hay dead. Because the barn was connected to the house, they were able to go on into the house and check to see where wee Joseph and Maria were. Walked into wee Joseph's room, and there he is lying dead in his cot. And that was grand. Went into Maria, the housemaid's room, and she was on the floor, and mattress and sheets and all covering her, lying dead as well. So every single one of them, 6 people lying dead in a house. Thing that I don't understand, in the barn the dog was tied up beside the bodies, but what also was reported was that whenever they entered the barn and they seen the bodies and the dog took a particular disliking to Lorenz Schlittenbaum. So why would the dog take a particular disliking to Lorenz. Like apparently the dog was barking and barking and barking and barking away, and like retreating away from Lorenz. So that's a wee bit suspicious, isn't it? So the police had concluded in their investigation that the murderer had drawn a member of the family into the barn one by one and murdered them before they could cry out for help to the others. Mind I said the bodies was lying on the hay. The bodies was lying on the hay, and then a door, like an old door that was in the barn, was also on top of them. So this is what the bodies looked like whenever they were all covered up with the hay. And whenever they uncovered the bodies, this is what they were lying like underneath of the hay. So Dr. Johann Baptist O'Miller, the like district physician, like autopsy person, whatever they're called, he had confirmed that each victim was killed like with like a pickaxe sort of thing, and like bludgeoned in the face like loads of times with this pickaxe or something similar to it anyway. And he also like concluded that the murder took place between the 31st of March and the 1st of April. So they all were killed with a couple like loads of fatal blows to the skull, whereas baby Joseph was just hit once with a fatal blow to the skull. It was also found that Kazilla, the 7-year-old, she actually survived her like killing, and she didn't actually die until several hours after the attack. She had just been beat in the face with like a pickaxe or something like that and lived. Her fingers and everything was intertwined with clumps of hair, so she was pulling at her hair, like pulling clumps of her hair out. So the police summarised this killing as a robbery, right? But then this was later like discontinued because there was nothing actually stole from the house. Like there was a large sum of money sitting clear as day for anyone to see, and it wasn't stole. So if it was a robbery, they would have stole it because this family was really wealthy, so this is why it was put down to robbery. But no, it wasn't. What was even worse was the fact that the killer had remained in the house for several days after the attack. Like after he killed everyone, he remained in the house. Okay, weird. Mind you, after these Hinterkaifeck murders had taken place, the murderer, he decided, oh, I'll feed the cows, I'll make myself dinner, I'll light the fire, I'll milk the cows. And no, literally he milked the cows. He fed all the livestock and he milked the cows. I'm saying he, don't know if it was a woman or not, like, but he's just what I'm saying, okay, get with it. So anyways, so this was then thought that maybe the murderer was going to benefit financially by keeping the livestock alive. Like maybe he was going to take them then and make so much fortunes off of them because obviously they were rich. There was like over 100 people interviewed in total for like the murders, like civilians who lived in like this area, and even just locals that was just passing through. Even like they were witnesses. Like could have been anyone, literally could have been anyone. There's no evidence like that anyone wanted to kill. But weirdly enough, the mechanic that was working that day on the farm, he didn't get interviewed until 11 years later. Okay, someone was on the grounds the morning that the bodies was found, and I'm not interviewing him in case he's seen anything. We'll just not interview him until 11 years later. Okay. So to this day, like, they still don't know who murdered them, and you know, none of the suspects had any logical connection to the murder. So however, this is some tea. Lorenz Schlittenbaum, the one that wanted to marry the daughter, he was one of their prime suspects. Let's get into that theory. So he was one of their prime suspects due to the fact that he already had a clash with Andreas over like wanting to marry Victoria, and Andreas not allowing it, and all this. Also came out that it was Lorenz that reported the incest to the authorities between Andreas and his daughter Victoria. So according to the neighbours, that whenever Lorenz discovered the bodies in the barn, he didn't seem shocked or concerned. He was just unfazed. Like, then obviously, like, this could be due to shock or anything. Like, so in March, 30th of March 1931, Lorenz was then again interviewed as a suspect, but he had stated that he was a happily married man at the time and he had absolutely no reason, like, for to murder the whole entire family. So why would he have done it? And they had no evidence against him, so yeah, that was just discontinued. He wasn't a suspect anymore. And then, almost 20 years after the Hinterkaifeck murders in 1941, the case may have actually been solved. A woman named Crescentia Mayer told the priest Anton Heuber, I don't know, that actually her two brothers had something to do with the Hinterkaifeck murders. Now, she was on her deathbed whenever she confessed this, and so obviously she couldn't be done for conspiracy or anything. So the man that was in question then, these two men, her brothers, was Adolf and Anton Gump. Okay, gotcha. So Detective Roundgruber actually made Adolf Gump a prime suspect in 1922, but there was no circumstantial evidence, so that was disregarded. But Adolf Gump did kill 13 people the exact same time around Hinterkaifeck. Yeah. So he, just killed 13 people. Well, was a suspect in killing 13 people, but they were nearly sure it was him. So then they thought maybe it was him that killed the 6 people in Hinterkaifeck, but there was no evidence, so they couldn't actually link him to it. And then whenever they actually went, it was like 8 years after, whenever they actually went to question Adolf, he had actually died 8 years prior, so they couldn't do anything about that either. Yeah, he was dead. And then Anton, they arrested Anton and held him, but they couldn't hold him any longer because there was no circumstantial evidence against him. There was nothing to actually pinpoint him to the murder, so he was let go as well. He wasn't named the murderer, so it just went on again. This one gets to me. Back from the dead. Karl Gabriel. Is he back from the dead? Did he come and kill them? Let's get into it. This is the most far-fetched theory. There was no evidence to show that Karl Gabriel actually was killed in World War I in 1914. There was no evidence that he was dead. So then everyone was thinking, oh, maybe, just maybe, Karl's back from the dead. Boom. Was him killed him. Heard about the incest. Killed. Dead. Was him. Revenge. Maybe. So then they went around and the Germans, they had went and talked to different soldiers and whatnot. But then after digging around and talking to soldiers, the soldiers had said that Karl was definitely dead because they just seen him blow up on a mine. Like, they witnessed his death. They witnessed Karl stepping out onto the mine and dying, so then that was just disregarded as well. Karl was no longer a suspect. Another theory is that Karl had told the other soldiers in the war about his wife's wealth and that they were so financially stable, they had so much money, and after the war then he had went, they some of the soldiers went and tried to rob them and killed them, but obviously that wasn't the case, is because there was nothing stole from the family, it was just killings. But then another theory is that one of the soldiers might have heard of the incest between Karl's wife and father and thought, oh, I'm going to get revenge for Karl because Karl can't avenge himself, do you know, that sort of way, and thought, oh, I'm going to go after her and her family, if that makes sense. It could have been one of Karl's friends trying to avenge their dead friend and stand up for their children. So that is really it. That is the story of the Hinterkaifeck murders and the bodies in the barn. So who do you think killed them? Do you think it was Lorenz Schlittenbaum, or do you think it was that boy Adolf, or it literally could have been anybody? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and more importantly, if you want to hear specific murder mysteries, send me a DM on Instagram or put it down in the comments below and let me know what you think I should do, because obviously I want to tailor my murder mysteries to my audience. I hope you all enjoyed this murder mystery, and I will be 100% back next week. I shall see you next week for another murder mystery. Bye!